Hey everybody, welcome once again to The Only You, the English version of our Spanish podcast, Solo Tú. As you can see, I'm in a new location. I'm in the studio with the sign behind me and a lot of soundproofing, as well as a new computer. So kind of neat little camera angle we're looking at.
Yeah.
Uh, and as usual, we're here with Dr. Patino, and this is a live broadcast. So please feel free to write comments. We'd love to answer your questions and queries on air. And of course, if you're watching this later, or please subscribe, make some comments, quick likes. And again, you're part of our community. It is about you and only you. And of course, our host, Dr. Patino, how are you doing today? To use you one more time.
There you go. There you go. No, I'm fine. I mean, it's Tuesday. It's another day for live podcasting, and I'm very excited about it. I think that we're gonna have a nice program. We're gonna try to have a little conversation about different things, in particular, but it's become a newer thing: vaccine hesitancy, right? In particular, related to COVID. So hopefully, we can get some idea what's going on out there, and how come people has doubts, how do one ends up feeling doubtful about a vaccine?
Do you think that the somewhat recent history of the anti-vaxxing movement feeds into this significantly, or do you think it's really a separate issue with
i think
COVID?
it's i, I think it's a buildup of a number of different things. I think that um we have issues related to the anti-vax movement that existed in the past, and in general ended up discredited, right? Because a lot of the data that was being used to support the anti-vax movement was found to be delusional and not real, created by somebody else. But a lot of people bought into it. I mean, created big movements, and I think that there was a lot of disappointment. But that didn't kill the anti-vax movement, right? And then we have cultism that has grown, and then we have political issues, and then we have religious issues, and then we have just fear, right? So when you put those pieces together, I think that most of the current anti-vax problem is really contextual, right? It's like a perfect storm. I mean, we started this pandemic with a lot of doubt. We mismanaged it. We created political situations out of things that should have been political, like masks, and the existence of the virus. We tended to make it a racial issue. This is the Chinese virus. Okay. And then we had the politics of not wearing a mask, right? That basically split the country that was already on the path to a very complicated, dysfunctional process, because we didn't do any of the things the book said we were supposed to do during a pandemic, right? We just negated it. We threw away the book. We didn't do any significant testing. We didn't do investment on testing. So if you follow the movie of COVID-19 from December 2019 until now, you can kind of make sense, of why people are afraid of the vaccine.
It's interesting. I think I mentioned to you, I know people on both sides of this. Some say it's real, some say it's not. Oddly enough, a lot of the people who said it wasn't real are pretty excited that this vaccine's available now.
Well, and you and I have talked about this before. The whole dissemination of information, right, is not a an organic buildup of information. It's a dumping of information by a few strongly followed people, and then people become identified, right? And become identified for all the wrong reasons. Uh, Sometimes because of poverty, sometimes because of racism, sometimes because of just needing to belong somewhere, right? So, what I find really fascinating is that the people who are anti vaccine today in regards to COVID are overrepresenting among the people who are following the anti-mask, right? And the negation of the virus. So when you put those pieces together, you know that there's a good percentage of the population that perceive this issue as an issue of I can dig my heels and I have control over something, which is kind of foolish to some degree. You know, I have control over not vaccinating. Like if vaccination becomes a way of somebody obtaining power and control over you. And I think that there's a lot of that dichotomy, you know. I'm not going to let you control me. I'm not going to let you give me. I'm not going to let you touch me. I'm not going to let you come into my racial environment. Okay. So now, one common denominator for that underneath is fear, right? So it's a lot easier to handle fear aggressively than to handle fear logically, rationally, right? Because there's no way to manage fear. There's no way to control uncertainty, right? So when you present somebody with a vaccine and you said this could prevent you from getting COVID, and you believe is that that thing does not exist, well, I don't need the vaccine. Or if they think that it's just like the flu, so why do I need a vaccine and never get a flu vaccine? So any attempt to intrude into their, I'm gonna have to call it delusional world because it's really delusional, okay, becomes a new threat. So there's always this defensiveness, you know, where is the next threat coming from? Well, is it coming from lefty politics? Is it coming from a vaccine? Is it coming from people forcing me to use the mask? And I find it fascinating. I was looking at the vaccine bullies the other day on TV, and there was this lady who was screaming in the bank, you know, about the mask and the vaccine, yelling at the employees there because they were wearing masks and because they were advocating vaccination. And you wonder, what's the purpose? What purpose does it serve for this lady to be screaming her lungs out, okay, to state a point that is irrational to most people except her? Is the purpose to convince other people that she's right? Or is it really an attempt to keep people away from her, right?
Hmm,
I
interesting.
am my own, nobody can touch me type of situation.
Hmm. Yeah, it would be, I could see that. I mentioned the one person in particular, who I've known since high school. Um, just complete denier, said he had it. It's no big deal. And I mentioned to him, I said, look, I'm really glad you had a very, simple experience with COVID. Said, I unfortunately have lost quite a few friends. And he quite literally said, no, you haven't. I'm like, okay, well, I just came back from one of the funerals and that was the cause of death. Could not, would not accept the fact that I had had my experience. I mean, and so that to your point, there's is this huge disconnect between their reality and the rest of what we're all experiencing. And I'm happy he didn't have to experience that, and I am. But how negating my experience because it makes his more valid to himself and the people he hangs out with. Is I mean, is that the psychology really? I mean,
Well, I mean, to some degree, you have to look at purpose from two directions, right? Purpose
I
is,
can't hear you, sir.
can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
I cannot. Hopefully you're still
No?
recording.
Okay. Um, let me see. Are you there?
Still can't hear you.
No? Okay. Let's see. I can hear you.
I hope it's still recording.
Okay,
I
let's
just
keep
because I can't
going.
hear you doesn't mean it's still not recording.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I can hear you. You just can't hear me. Let me see if I change something on my audio. No, my audio seems to be going all right. Uh, yeah, maybe there's something at your end. I
Yeah.
can't hear you now.
I still cannot hear you. Can you hear me?
No, I can hear you. Is there a button on your headphones that you can't hear me? Okay, so are you there?
Some technical difficulty. I still can't hear you. Maybe I'll just wander over to your office in a minute. Maybe that's
Okay,
the best way to do it.
here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna open the chat and you're gonna see it. Okay. And what we can do is you can actually write me questions. Do you see my message? Okay. So my microphone seems to be going well. So let's continue the conversation, but I think that Vince is not going to be asking me questions in writing. And I'm going to try to answer them. I was trying to explain the rationale behind his friend negating his experience about his friends dying. And I have to say that that's not an unusual circumstance because sometimes the purpose is to really try to understand what did they get from you by pushing your buttons, right? I mean, what is their purpose on negating your experience when they don't know your experience is kind of delusional. And I'm typing. So I think that becomes
Oh,
important.
wonderful.
Okay. So you're gonna have to read my lips when I stop talking. You can interject.
Well, I did just get your message that the audience can hear us, and that's important. Probably more
Yeah,
than each other.
Absolutely.
But if you could address that last question, I mean, it amazes me that a person, and this person is well educated, could be so entrenched in their paradigm that they can totally deny my reality. Even oddly enough, they have their proof. I had the sniffles. I could literally bring the family of the deceased to them. But
But you
it's just
see,
this huge disconnect. It's crazy.
to some degree, that's the purpose. The purpose is to get you to defend your position that your friends died. And the moment you start defending your position, you've lost, right? So it becomes important that you don't allow defensiveness to get in the middle of a situation like this, because then you've lost.
But still, how do I mean? I don't understand what's his psychology. I didn't get defensive about it. I just said, okay, this is kind of weird. They're incredibly defensive about it. I just said, look, I just came back from a funeral, and he says, no, you didn't. Okay, it's kind
Yeah,
of
but you
odd.
see, yeah, so you're saying you just came back from a funeral. This is the beginning of defensiveness, right?
Gotcha.
Can you
Okay,
hear me now?
I can now. All of a sudden, it just popped back in. So this is fantastic. I'm very happy.
Well, those things happen, so let's not worry too much about it. So I was telling you that the person negating your reality becomes a way for them to get you to defend yourself. And in some way, at some level, they understand they can't defend what they're trying to defend, right?
So they force you to.
Exactly. So there is a degree of fear underneath that I think that we need to recognize. And this kind of sounds difficult because people who do those things get you upset, right? And once they get you upset, they got you. You've lost. Because now you have two problems. You have the problem that you're upset, and second, that they're still irrational.
Mm.
Okay. So we have to learn to listen and not try to correct them, but convince them that what they're thinking or what they're saying has no basis in reality, because it does not, right? I mean, there's some scientific facts that are real. The virus exists, COVID kills people, right? And it's not a Chinese virus. Viruses don't have nationalities. They're just viruses, right? So there's a lot of people out there who are angry and they have hunger for more anger, right? It's like that's the only way they can protect themselves and keep people away from them. And some of the threats that people are perceiving are real and they're being kind of not accepted in society, you know. But I mean, and we don't say this very often. And I was looking at some of the numbers the other day, but who are the people who are overrepresented among deniers of the vaccines or that have vaccine hesitancy? And it's not black people and brown people in general. There's a lot of white people who are not are hesitant to get the vaccine. And I'm not saying there are Latin American people or African American people or black people don't have hesitancy, right? But it's really fascinating to see over the last few months how we have focused on the black population in particular about being hesitant, right? When their hesitancy is very different historically and culturally than the hesitancy we're seeing with COVID-19. Is because slaves and black people were used as experiments,
Oh yeah,
right?
there's a history of it, quite a
It's
long
a history
history
of
of it.
it. So we have to be sensitive to those issues, right? But we have to be honest, and we need to stop talking about um, being hesitant, something to be proud of, right? There's nothing proudful about negating a virus or getting a vaccine. And I get back to the idea of purpose, right? Which is, what is the purpose of negating the vaccine? What is the purpose of saying I'm not going to get vaccinated? What's in it for you? And people don't like to answer that question, and because usually the answer is, I have power and control. I'm not going to let anybody get close to me. I'm not going to let anybody invade my privacy, right? And to some degree, it becomes like the last castle, my body. Nobody's going to touch my body. Nobody's going to tell me what I have to do with my body. And there's a tradition in this country of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you said before about how we from the get-go really didn't go along with the playbook. I have friends in about 22 different countries, and hearing what they did in their certain areas was very different. One of the things, obviously, lockdowns. Uh, but yes, there were some forced lockdowns or police and military in the street. But in particular, the one thing that I thought was interesting that we did not do at all here. I actually got certified as a contact tracer through Johns Hopkins because I said, okay, I want to help out. We didn't do any of that, and that's one of the most effective ways to help manage the spread of a disease like this.
Well, you have a great point there, because we had a playbook in place to do all of the stuff that you're talking about, right? But once we got past the first wave, March, April, May, here in Arizona and in the rest of the country, we lost control of testing. We didn't have enough testing. You probably remember all the dialogue
Mhm.
and all of that. And one of the phenomena that is happening right now, because we lost control over testing, is that it's never late to start, right? So right now, what is getting lost in the dialogue is that because we're only focusing on the vaccine, we're not paying attention to testing and contact tracing, right? So it becomes terribly important that if we are to be successful, okay, at managing the rest of this, We need to start doing contact tracing. We need to start doing it correctly. The problem is this thing got so much out of control, right? That people just give up because there was no political will, there was no scientific will, there was nothing driving, okay, the train. Okay. And
Uh,
we got hit a couple of times more. We got the wave in the spring, in the beginning of the fall, and then we got the late December, January hit. And we hope not to get another one, but we don't know because we don't have contact tracing. We do not know. We don't even know how many people have gotten COVID. All
mm,
right. We don't know how many people are asymptomatic. We have these formulas and we can try to calculate. And it worries me from the what's in it for me and getting vaccinated. It worries me the vulnerable people, right? It worries me the people who we see, the people who are depressed, who are anxious, who have attention deficit disorder, who have substance abuse problems from all races, right? Because they are afraid to begin with. Okay. And we don't have any way of giving them any guidance in terms of the how to. So we can encourage, we can try to provide some information about it. But if you go to any health department in the United States today, they have no idea of how many people have gotten COVID. They don't have any idea how many asymptomatic people are out there. We don't know. And we're not doing enough testing today, right?
it almost seems like we're only concentrating on one data point at a time. First it was the spread or death. First it was deaths, right? Of course,
Mm.
the mortality. And then it became the spread. Now it's only about how many people are being vaccinated, but it's really a combination of all those numbers that gives you the reality on the ground.
Correct. But what we have to be careful is that the fact that we didn't do it right doesn't make it unreal. It doesn't make it like the virus doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that the vaccine is a tool of control from the left political wings. I mean, the pandemic is real. It's killed more people in the United States as a percentage of the population than any other country in the world.
Which is really, really sad when you look at all that we had with communications, our technology, our health system. As you know, I like to stay apolitical, but just an overwhelming failure of leadership and communication from the top down. I think that could have negated a lot of this. But as you just said, it's not too late to start.
Correct.
So
And the thing is that there's a lot of conversation going on into how do we go about convincing people who don't want to be convinced that they should get the vaccine, right? And I think that we need to do more to include people into the whole process, right? That the vaccine is not the answer for the pandemic. Okay, it's a protection. But we need to, I think that we need to create some sort of a volunteer driving force that is going to do what we need to do: contact tracing, testing, you know, um, identifying communities are new at risk. Uh, how are we going to handle children when they go to school? And even if the teachers are vaccinated, we're getting new strains, right? And the kids are not vaccinated. How are we going to manage that? How are we going to trace it? How are we going to do the contact tracing required in schools? And um, we still haven't figured out, I think, in this country how to do things for the right reason. And I've said that before. If you can figure it out, how can somebody make money out of contact tracing?
then they'll do it.
Of course,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But we won't do it because it's good for my neighbor. We're not going to do it because it's good for my kids. Okay. We always do the right thing. Very often we do it for the wrong reason. I mean, it's like right now, there's a lot of emphasis on, as you said, one thing at a time, right? When was the last time you heard about therapeutics for COVID?
Nothing.
Not much since the vaccine came up in December, right?
It's like this is the one answer no matter what. And now everyone's just happy to ignore everything else.
Exactly. But COVID is here to stay with us for a long time. For those of us who work in medicine, in psychiatry, and in mental health and in public health, we stay on top of trying to figure out, okay, so what else do we have? I mean, it's like we have this collective negation of risk, right? And it's and if we all get herd immunity, we're cured. And you've heard me say this before. In the world, in medicine in general, if you don't kill it with an antibiotic or remove it by surgery, we don't cure anything. We manage things. So the question is, how are we managing this? I think we're doing a better job, okay? Because we're trying to undo all the badness that was done before, but we're still far away from getting to having a handle of this problem, right? Now, back to vaccine hesitancy, I think it's very important that when we confront people who don't want to get the vaccine, it happens to me every day because part of our job here, even though we're in psychiatry and in the hospital, is to ask people, have you been vaccinated? Okay. And if they say no, to establish a conversation with them, not about you have to get vaccinated, right? But I think it's good to teach by example sometimes. So I let them know I have been vaccinated, you know, and I don't feel controlled by anybody, and I haven't turned green or I don't know or anything like that.
Turn zombie.
Exactly, not a zombie yet. Maybe I am. I don't know. Anyhow, but the reality is that you have to present it with something we talked about before, which is the risk management perspective. Okay, what is the risk of taking the vaccine? Okay, what is the benefit of taking the vaccine? And what is the risk of doing nothing? And that's a process that we go through with patients, and we should go with people all the time. Okay, there are people who may be willing to take the risk of not being vaccinated after they rationally understand the risk of not being vaccinated, right? I mean, some people may disagree with me and they would say, okay, it has to be a mandate, right? Well, I don't think that that will work very well in this country, right? I think that people should be forced into getting the vaccine, which would probably be a huge constitutional issue in this country, right? So, short of that, we have to accept that there's going to be some hesitancy, right? And that we have to be prepared to deal with it as long as it's not extremely large, right? Now, I think it's also important for those people who stay irrational, which are the most difficult people to talk to have a little empathy for their fear, right?
Mm.
And instead of fighting with them and telling them how crazy their thinking is, try to understand where the fear comes from and to lend a hand. Because the question and the message that we have to deliver that most people don't want to hear is, how can I help you not feel so fearful? How can I be of help to you? Not how I'm going to convince you or how I'm going to criticize you or how I'm going to judge you. But how can I be of help to you? Right? I'm all ears.
Mm.
Help me help you, right? Now, there's going to be a small number of people that would say, I don't need any help. And that is fine. There's a point we have to accept that some people feel more comfortable in their bubble of misery. And you and I are writing about this, and we're going to be writing more about the bubble of misery. But sometimes people get so entrenched in their bubble of misery that they don't want to come out of it.
Mm.
It doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter how many hands we extend. It's too risky for them to not be miserable, right? So we really have to get into understanding who those people are, right? Unfortunately, some of the people who are chronically miserable in their bubble and don't want to take any risk with the rest of society together, right? Then they start spreading their beliefs, right? And beliefs are not the same as science, right? You
We've
can
talked about that a lot.
I mean, you can believe anything you want, doesn't mean that it's real, right? But that's different than faith, though, right? And I think that faith drives purpose. Hope drives purpose, right? When negativity is the purpose, then you're going to be entrenched in the bubble of misery. But if you allow yourself to say, I have faith in humanity, can I sell humanity to people? Can I sell the idea that we are worth staying alive for and we are worth trying for, right? And that requires a huge, high degree of self confidence and self security. But we can try to get there, right? I mean, that you can say, I'm worth trying for, and I'm going to help my neighbor. We get back to the issue of values, you know. I mean, some people translate faith into religion. Some people translate faith into culture. Some people translate faith into altruism. It doesn't matter, right? As long as you're not taking yourself into the bubble of misery. And the bubble of misery is something that I talk a lot because I deal with that a lot. You know, most of the people that I see who have chronic emotional issues have been in the bubble of misery for a long time. And, you know, misery becomes comfortable
You know,
and safe.
you said something I think is kind of interesting, how we should have a different approach to these people who have their own thoughts on the matter. Ask them how to help them because it's obviously comes from a place of fear. But even beyond that, maybe the answer is not, hey, what you're thinking is delusional, but you know what? It's really simply like, you know what? I have faith that we're going to get through this. You doing it your way, me doing it my way. How can we help one another?
That's another way. You see, what happens is that for as long as we present ourselves as their enemy because we think different and because we judge people as being quote unquote crazy, okay, that perpetuates the problem.
Mm.
That perpetuates the process of defensiveness, and the people get convinced to go back into the bubble, right? I think that part of the problem that we have confronted over the last year is that the bubble got too big, too many people in it. And
Well,
I,
no, it's communities, not just individuals.
correct. And it's difficult sometimes because you have to get one individual at a time, you know, to be willing to take the risk of not being in the bubble.
Mm.
And that requires a lot of empathy. It requires a lot of community work, right? That people are invited, you know, to walk out of the bubble and being told that you're welcome, right? You're welcome here where the rest of humanity is. Because if we keep pushing them away, if we keep not being empathic to their fears, okay, and their understanding of the world, then they'll never come out, right? So even if we do it for selfish reasons, you know, because me understanding you is good for me, not just for you. Because at the end of the day, the only option is that we destroy each other, right? So if we look at community, we look as society, what's our purpose? Where are we going? What do we have faith on? Right. And at the end of the day, regardless of what people believe and regardless of their religion, all we have is each other as a species, right?
Well, there's the only you, but there's also the only us.
Correct. Which is step number two. Because the whole purpose of the only you process that you and I have talked about before is that in order for you to be able to give yourself and be empathic to the rest of the world, you have to be empathic to yourself too. You know, if all you feel is hate, in some indirect ways, you're hating yourself too, right? You're not worth people getting close to you. You don't feel confident enough to allow people to take the risk of being with you. So it's a lot easier to be angry. And that's kind of regression on the process of growth, right? Because that's what adolescents do. Okay, adolescents keep you at bay. They get angry at you. They argue with you. Let's not talk about a 3-year-old, right? They get all your attention in all the wrong ways. And the way to go about it, I was reading an article the other day about other cultures, how they raise their kids and how they raise their kids to be helpful, right? And how they train them to be part of the group, right? And one of the main things they do, I'll say you the article, is they ignore the kids' tantrums. So in this particular case, because it's so big, I don't think that we can ignore the community societal tantrum, but we need to be empathic and smart on how to approach it, right? So what moms do in the Mayan communities or in Southeast Asia and in some of the Brazilian places is that they're not going to argue with the kids. They're not going to get into a uh, into trying to recognize the tantrum of the child because they recognize that that empowers the child, right? So they just move away. What do we do in our society? You know, oh, poor you, you're throwing a tantrum,
Oh, we engage. Because if you don't engage, you're weak, and all the other things associated with allowing somebody to to do that to you.
So how do we stop engaging, you know, in this dialogue that is senseless because um, that's the only way people can feel safe, right? So that whole process, I think, in general, needs to be driven more toward I'm here when you're ready. Here's my hand, right? If you're too afraid to do it alone, how can I help you walk out of the bubble of misery, this communal bubble of misery, right? In which there's an echo chamber of only the conversation can be heard. And the problem is not that they're right or wrong. It shouldn't be looked at it in that perspective. Is what's in it for them,
Mm. Yeah, what
and
value do they get out of denying all these things and acting or what you may think is irrational, and vice versa? What do they think we're getting out of it? And maybe that's where you start. Decide to yourself, okay, what am I getting out of this by wearing my mask, by getting my vaccination, by telling my friends these things, and by not, we go that next step, engaging against these people and just trying to do my best to listen empathically to understand. Because again, it is based in fear. Then
well,
that's a sad existence to live in fear.
well, um, I think that it is important that we set up the parameters, society wise, for people to feel comfortable coming out, right? Coming out of the bubble, if you may, right? That's, um, I deal with that every day on a one-to-one basis with patients, and not unusually a kid or even an adult would be throwing a tantrum in front of me and telling me how terrible I am and I'm the worst person in the world and the worst doctor, blah, blah, blah. And I have to be able to hear it and listen to it, right? And try to understand why you're telling me that. What is the purpose of you telling me that? Uh, are you trying to get me to argue with you because that gives you some sense of power and control? Are you telling me that you're lonely and sad? I need to understand that so I can give something back, right? But I can assure you, I cannot give anything back if my first reaction is to tell them, how dare you treat me like that? You know, don't you know who I am? I'm the doctor, right? I mean, that'd be too easy, but it serves no purpose because it's not about me. It's about them. And it's always about them. I mean, I painfully learned that in my last 33 years of practicing psychiatry and seeing patients in the hospital, and is that it can never be about me. The moment that it becomes about me, then I have to defend myself,
Mm.
right? So you can take that into a more societal level and said, you know, I understand that it's difficult for you to not blame me for your misery, right? Okay. But you blaming me doesn't help you in any way. So, do you need help? And if you need help, my hand's here. I understand you're suffering, right? I understand the fear, but the fear is not going to be constructive in any way. I mean, you're in the securities business. I mean, security, stuff and training people and all of that.
And I deal with a lot of fear.
Exactly. But you have to recognize it, right? I mean, you're probably excessively sensitive to spotting it,
A bit.
because even aggressive people have fear.
Oh, very much so. And
Yeah.
that's the first thing you have to recognize. In fact, some of the people I work with, some of the highest level, you know, special operations people, it was amazing to be to be invited into their world. They very openly talk about the scary stuff. And you're like,
Yeah.
what? You guys are afraid? They're like, well, heck yeah. We just mitigate things and we, go on with our business. But they come out very openly and talk about it. That's how it was. It showed me so quickly how tough and strong they were. They didn't hide it behind machismo or anything. It was the first thing talked about. Okay, guy, what are the risks and how do we mitigate those so we can continue on and complete this mission, whatever it is. Very different mindset. Very
Yeah,
different
and,
mindset.
and that's a wonderful sideway to mitigation, right? Because that's the point. Is really the idea that we need to mitigate risk, but you cannot mitigate risk if you don't identify it,
Absolutely.
right? And a lot of the people who are hesitant are either negating the risk of not recognizing it, right? So it is important for us to present it with the understanding of the risk so they can make an informed decision. That's what medicine is all about. It's about informed decisions. But we cannot make it aggressively, but we can make it empathically, right? And I think that part of and this has been my criticism of society in the last 20 years because of the influence of media, is that we become too prone and impulsive to judge. I mean, it's almost like we're waiting for somebody to make a mistake so we can make a judgment, right?
Mm.
I mean, people goes on Instagram, Facebook, and they're not scrolling to recognize their old friends. They're scrolling to see if somebody made a mistake or looks bad. Judgment, judgment, judgment. And that's not healthy, right? It is not healthy because it becomes eventually a way to ventilate your conflicts personally into others, right? So we need to do a little more introspection. We need to do a lot more mitigation, and we need to be a lot more empathic to those who are avoiding mitigation, if you may.
And really, wouldn't that, like we mentioned a little bit earlier, start with ourselves? Every individual has to look at what, really be honest with themselves of how they're behaving, how they're approaching this. If you are an anti-vaxxer, again, that's your choice. But let's have you look at it from a different perspective. And if you're a person who thinks vaccine's the only way to go, which we know it's not, we need to look at that too. All the factors that are going to help us to get past this. It's not just one thing or the other, but it does start with us.
Well, it starts with you, of course. You see, there's a word that we don't use very often anymore. It's called humility. I mean, we don't hear that very often. Um, and it's something that we have to try to get as much of as we can, right?
It used to be a
That
compliment, and now it's almost an insult.
yeah, I mean, it's synonymous to weakness now, right?
Yes. So as well with good manners and being polite, um, very different.
Yeah, but you see, I'm not a very religious person, you know that, and I don't talk a lot about religion. Um, but I always ask people, what would Jesus do, right? And especially Christian people,
Oh
people
yes.
who are very Christian, because a lot of what I've seen coming out of their mouths is nothing that Jesus would say or do.
Mahatma Gandhi said that. He said, "I really like Jesus, but it's your Christians I don't know about."
So I think it's important to remember that, right? That we have to be empathic and we have to have humility right? We shouldn't be afraid of people being verbally aggressive with us, you know. Somebody has to be the adult in the room.
So make it you.
Yeah, because that's all you control. All you control is what you do. You know, people who are yelling and screaming are not listening. So why do you listen to them? Right? We'll listen to them when they stop yelling and screaming, right? So I think that we need to set the parameters for mitigation and management of this long term. And again, just to finish the conversation, I really encourage people to be vaccinated, to learn more about the risks and benefits, but stop negating the existence of a virus. You know, there's nothing in it for you on negation.
And wear your mask and socially distance and do all the other things that aren't really that difficult to do to help us get control of this. Because we are, I have that cliche, but it's true. We are all in this together.
Well, I hope that we learned something from the last year, right?
I hope so.
Hey, Vince, it was a pleasure. Thank you for being here again tonight. We'll see you again next week.
Wonderful.
We'll be meeting again on the regular basis, and there's more to come. Thank you for the audience for joining us. And if you have an opportunity, you can always subscribe to our podcast, and we'll be here next week again. Thank you.
Wonderful. Take care.
Okay.